from Lucifer.
Well,
what we're really talking about here is Lucifer, the fallen angel, and they have picked up on this, the Illuminati. And if you take a look at some of the Chevys, now they're called the Illumin, and they have the horns going up in the back of the vehicle, very subtly telling us that something is coming down by the year 2000. It's from Lucifer.
Examining the Mothman links on the West Coast and other parts of the country. As we do this, as I've gone around the country and met people and talked to people about their experiences, I've found that there are strange synchronicities with things from my own life. And one of these is a lady that I met recently who had an experience, an abduction experience near Waynesboro, Virginia, on the Skyline Drive. I don't know if I mentioned it earlier, but one time I was up there near Waynesboro, early 80s, around the time of the flap, the Bigfoot and UFO flap in West Virginia and Ohio. And that I had run across what seemed to be a Bigfoot clan or something. It sounded like several creatures terrorizing us throughout the night. And this is a part of the Skyline Drive. Well, you're not allowed to park on the Skyline Drive, so there's miles and miles of ridge, the top of the Appalachians there, that is, no one's there at night. You're not allowed to park, so there's no camping. However, we had gotten off we had broken the law and gone in there and camped. So the area that we were in was really just, there weren't humans there at night. So it's hard. I mean, I can see where it sort of had an unbroken line going back to the ancient past. The creatures that were there 1,000 years ago are still there. Anyway, this location, becomes important, and it's not a West Virginia location, but it's nearby, right off the border of West Virginia. In fact, very near some of the secret bases that we've talked about before, military bases. Some are underground cities and things like that, such as Mount Weather. Anyway, this person who had this experience on the Skyline Drive, with a UFO being abducted, examined, claims that her father was a member of a high-level military Pentagon council. Her whole life seems to have been affected by these creatures, and she claims that there's something called the Justice League in the UFO world, and it's literally good aliens, positive aliens that can come to your aid. And this goes way back in the UFO lore, that there are good and bad aliens. But it reminded me, this is the same, they used to sell Justice League comics in North Charleston at Van's Never Closed Market, where all the kids used to hang out and where Charles Manson and Sarah Jane Moore hung out. So, let us move on with further examinations and questions and investigations and see what we come up with. We're starting to get into a world where it appears that the creatures themselves shift from one to another. So a shape-shifting, there's a shape-shifting component It could be that if you look at some of the reports of Bat Squatch, for instance, that there's a Mothman Bigfoot connection. That some of the, if you look at the Bigfoot, if you look at a Bigfoot that could fly, you find out that that's very similar to a Mothman. So we're going to look at that and some other very interesting things coming up right here, Part 4, Mothman's Photographer. Here we are in San Antonio, Texas, on the edge of the Olmos Basin, which is a natural depression in the earth here. It's never been quite explained, but you notice where we're at right now. We are on top of the hill. Well, actually, we're just on the edge of the basin. It seems like you're on the top of the hill. We've got the water tower here, Trinity University there, a view of downtown San Antonio. If you look around, I'll just do a quick pan. You can sort of see how it just sort of dips down in the area around here. Especially as you look in this direction, you can see that the cars are below. The dip starts there and it kind of winds around to the left. And there's forest over there to the east, and there's also forest behind the water tower to the northwest. And that's just lush parkland right now in this depression, which is it looks like it goes down dozens of feet. This is the area where Whitley Strieber claims that the secret school took place, which is where the kids of the area would at night sort of as if in trance ride their bikes into the basin to this spot where they would be tutored by extraterrestrial beings and shown visions of the future, visions of the past, not unlike the Mothman prophecies. So we're here to explore the basin, try to find that spot, and get some psychic indications of what happened here. I think I found the spot where Strieber's encounters took place. It's very close to here. It's on a steep embankment, so I'm just going to film right here. Looks like they've recently put in a road here or something, so it's kind of right now. It's these days it's close to a road. The feeling I get here in the basin is that it has that same electromagnetic feel as the Woodward Drive window. It has an ancient feel to it. I think because of its nature as a depressed geographic area, that it was probably used by Indians. Because in Texas the weather can be pretty severe. There are a lot of streams running through here, so it'd be a good source of water, and protection from the winds, which can be pretty bad during hurricane season, or I'm sorry, tornado season. It just feels like it's been inhabited for a long, long, long time. Something definitely happened to Strieber. He's describing a real phenomenon. Whether or not all of his conclusions or assumptions are true, I don't know, but there's definitely something here. That appears to be the old tree that Strieber describes in The Secret School. There was a special old tree where he would meet, the kids would gather and meet a cloaked figure who appeared to be a very, very old woman. This woman would tap the boys and cause them to see the future or the past. And Strieber said he looked into her hooded face once, and it was almost like, it was sort of like looking into a void, but he could tell that she was a female. And that sort of feels like the nightmares that myself and others have had in Woodward Drive about these cloaked figures, and also the sighting that Harriet had of the cloaked Braxton County, or I'm sorry, Flatwoods monster. Flatwoods monster could be the feminine hooded figure from Strieber's San Antonio experiences, because Harriet states that the gender seemed to change, or that the being, she saw a female being and a male being, and it could be that the cloaked figure, which she thought was male, is a gender shifter, and perhaps can shift back and forth, and or there could be male and female Flatwoods style cloaked figures working through people's genders, the witnesses' genders as well, for completing their mission in life. Sometimes the gender role can cause issues or blockages or identifications with the role that can interfere with the person's advancement as a spiritual being. It's the spirit being bodiless, physical, lacking in physical form, and therefore in gender. One of the things I noticed is the smell here. It's similar to that cucumbery smell that we smelled in Woodrum's Lane near this shrined location. The smell that Harriet smelled when she saw the Flatwoods monster. I started to sense that you were taking us into a visionary area of your mind where you see atoms intermingling, and I think that's a really important thing, because a lot of people just don't have the minds that can visualize that way.
Well, okay, you got a certain amount of elements, finite numbers so far that they've found, so they haven't found all. So there's some missing pieces of the puzzle, right? So, okay, these elements, they have these orbits, and when the orbits hit, that's what we see. Our senses pick up these orbits, and that's what everything is. Thank goodness it stays like that. But occasionally you'll see metaphors in nature repeated over and over in different mediums, in animal and plant and mineral. You'll see things that look like each other, and then if you look down in the microscope and you notice, wow, it's all made out of the same stuff. And then you look at the DNA and it's like, wow, we're totally related to yeast. This rotting stuff in this cup. This is my relative. Okay. So now you're related to everything. And so the more ways that you see the metaphors, then you can see things from multiple angles. And then so you can get out of the way that it just looks all the time. You can see it over here, you can see it over here, you can see it over here, you can see it from here. And so you don't just get the flat thing. But then every once in a while, to fuck things up, things don't happen the way they're supposed to happen. For some reason, something else happens that's way off the scale of things. And then I was watching the special on the parallel universes, and they were like on the the ultra microscopic, the microatomic level. When they look at stuff, instead of and they used a pool table, and they shot a ball, and it hit this ball, and we should be able to determine where the ball goes using Newtonian physics, but instead the ball just does whatever it wants, basically. It's like, at that point, the dimensions are getting confused, and they're altering each other in really tiny little increments. And they were saying it's because these parallel universes smashed on top of each other, and every once on the microatomic level they get confused, and so we have to use these statistical ways to measure things because they're not acting like they would in our reality these days.
So, are you talking about what it takes to measure an irregularity, and it broadens out the length of the time?
It makes me think that that just makes it okay. They've just now found a boundary of something, right? They're about to go into this next realm. They have noticed that in this other realm, things aren't acting the way they're supposed to. Okay, so they've kind of opened this door, and they're going to go into this other realm, into this new realm, right? So, but in the meanwhile, you wanted me to bring in the alien thing. There is this one theory that the aliens are the people from the future looking through the past, and see, they have the ability to travel through time. See, first we had the ability to travel by walking, and then we had the ability to travel when we had a boat across the ocean. Then we had the ability to fly, and then we were traveling in the sky. Then we went to the moon. Now we're traveling through space, but we still haven't learned how to travel through time. It's the next journey back and forth in time, but in parallel dimensions, so you don't screw up your universe.
When something happens
if you take a shortcut through another person's universe, you're not going to screw up your universe, especially if you go back in time. So
if something happens in one dimension, does it affect the next dimension?
See, that would cause it to just go off into a whole nother way and fuck up the past history, splitting it off into a parallel history, you know? So that splits off, and there's all these, but this is all just on the really tiny level where it doesn't matter, because luckily we're stuck in this realm. For some people that hear voices and they're all like not stuck in this realm, that's when their senses don't know that they're grounded in this one place and everything is okay. Then they have a little bit more trouble, which is kind of sad. But it was just, and then this other, and so I was thinking about these parallel universes on the small level where things are, like they said, the ball came like this, but from some other universe, a ball hit the ball and it caused it to go like that, and then it bounced that way and it disappeared it wasn't even in our universe anymore. So it was like this in and out at a certain level, the tiniest level where the things trade. It's almost like they're confused in what universe they're in, or when we perceive them, when we're looking at them in our universe, they're obviously leaving this one and going somewhere else, or something from somewhere else is affecting it that shouldn't be there. You know, it's like you throw the ball and something just knocks it out of its orbit from some, you know, it's like you're putting two layers of film on top of each other, and so the image is getting confused. So anyway.
Well, it's only getting confused because of your vantage point.
Okay, but then, so I was thinking about this, and then I met this friend of mine, Shannon, in Fort Worth, and she told me the story about how her sister's husband and their daughter were killed in this car accident. The same day, this other woman's husband and son were killed in a plane crash. The same day. Okay, and they didn't know about this until they ran into each other. The first time Shannon saw this woman is when they met at this place, and they were talking, and they were like, oh, and one said, my mother died this day, and my other one said, oh, I had a sister who died this day. So they met on the same day where two people died on the same day. Then years later, they meet at the hospital, and Shannon goes in, and she sees this woman there, and she's like, why are you here? And Shannon says, well, my sister's having this baby. And she's, oh, really? I'm here because my mother just passed away, or she's dying, or something like that. She was in the same, once again, this time one was coming and one was going. And then she's like, wow, that's really weird. That's just like the last time I saw you. We had those other deaths in our family. I said, and then she's like, did anything else happen? And she's like, oh yeah, a few months ago, Shannon was saying, my sister's husband and her son were killed in a car accident. She said, really? And then she goes, my sister's husband and son were killed in a plane crash in Hawaii. And she's like, when did it happen? And it turned out it was the same day again. It's like, and so Shannon was like, man, I started feeling like the angel of death and stuff. And she's like, man, I hope if I don't see her again and something happened. I was like, well, they say it happens in threes. Maybe you're over it now. But it could be like, you get this little thing where you get this little overlap in the universes, and you get these parallel things happening, and then the people meet up. I don't know. Because it's like off the scale of synchronicity. But it's just like, it's just so high up. It's like winning the lottery or something, but maybe even higher than that. So it's this weird lottery of coincidence. It makes you wonder if there's some overlap, and because these people were not related, at least, like, oh, you're, not directly, but it was like a weird thing for them to experience. I don't know. It was a weird ghost story that I heard recently. That's what I wanted to tell you.
Is this the person who lived on the block or the neighborhood where I guess they were all Navy kids and they were all being mind controlled or something?
No. That was another girl from D.C. That was in Washington, D.C.
And you mentioned another friend once who I guess they had seen a veil of energy and someone had walked into it.
Oh, that was just at a UFO meeting when a guy's roommate said he was
because I encountered one of those a couple of years ago.
His roommate was too scared to sleep with a door, so he took his door off because he didn't want to be in his room alone because he said the aliens would come at night. And one night, his roommate, this is at a UFO meeting, this is when I stopped going because I was like, I don't need to know about this kind of shit. He said, this wasn't from the abductee, this was the roommate's abductee. He said, I heard my roommate screaming, help me, help me. And I got out of bed and I ran to his room and I hit this wall of energy, invisible wall of energy. Totally nothing there. He couldn't get through the door, but he could see through it, and he saw his roommate, horrified, laid out on his bed with the big head floating parallel to him. This is what the guy said, staring down at him. And then he looked back at him, like all pissed off looking, of course. And then the guy like woke up in his bed. That was, he went from force field to back in bed, going, I can't help you. And then they both wake up the next day. What the fuck happened last night? And then they both said this stuff happened. But, that's just them, it could have been a ghost story. It could have been like totally made up. It would have been a good story, but it was an interesting story anyway. But that's where I heard that from. So, when people tell me the ghost story stuff, I just go, oh, and the other story, Shannon said there was this weird thing too where the one surviving kid of the family saw the other kid, but, like a ghost, and said to Shannon, hey, I see, his deceased sibling. That was another part of that story too. But I don't know. She told me after a show, and I was trying to remember because I was like, oh, this is really weird, And I was like, you're not the angel of death. She was going to a yoga class the next day, so I think she's going to be okay.
That was Gary Chester, a musician in Austin, Texas, near San Antonio. He's a member of the Austin Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. He was discussing a topic there having to do with quantum physics, and I'm showing this Garuda statue because I believe that the Garuda is an ancient symbol for what we are studying today in quantum physics, string theory. Gary was talking about string theory and how the strings, appear at one end of the loop of that string. It appears to go into another dimension, and that's the problem they're having, figuring out how do you predict what's going to go on with these strings since they appear to leave and come back, leave the dimension and come back again in a different form as you're observing them. If you notice this is a statue that's very helpful in understanding it. This is a Garuda statue from India. It's thousands of years old, and you can kind of see the cross. This kind of relates to the Christian cross, this standing up with your arms spread, but if you notice the serpents on either side, there's always a serpent. The Garuda is always holding a serpent, standing on a serpent, but it's a two-headed serpent. And I also have a Native American image that shows that the same concept comes through with the Thunderbird. This Garuda is holding two serpents or it's like, instead of seeing it as a string theory, see it as a serpent theory. The serpent is another way to describe the string. And the Garuda connects. He completes the circuit. If that serpent, that two-headed serpent, before it comes back around on itself, it meets the Garuda's hands. And the Garuda represents, of course, the void. So this is the other dimension where that loop of the string goes. It goes to where the Garuda is, and the Garuda stands there guarding that spot. It's the guardian to the other dimension. And it's helpful to see it this way. And then a lot of the things that come up in the Mothman world make a lot more sense. I actually think what's going on in terms of conspiracies and things, the government is researching this. It's clear that NASA is not only looking into outer space, it's looking into inner space, and it's studying the Earth, and it's studying the geomagnetic areas of the world. And this is I've seen this time and time again. They're there. There's even a guy in West Virginia in a town called Liberty. By the way, there was a Liberty, Ohio, just last week that had some mysterious screams similar to the Moorhead, Kentucky screams, similar to the screams that I heard on Skyline Drive in Virginia. Where was I going? Garuda completes the circuit, and I think that NASA. I think this is why they were studying the events in West Virginia, and why apparently, according to this this man, his name is I'll find it. Well, William Dean Ross, I think, claims that NASA, in conjunction with the NSA and the CIA, are doing research into paranormal sites in West Virginia near Institute, which is next to Mound, where I lived. So, and Liberty is between where I lived and Point Pleasant. So, in a town closer to Point Pleasant than where I was, there are some old Adena Indian sites that Ross says are being studied. They're basically trying to understand other dimensions and vortexes. And this probably started back at the time of the Mothman sightings. And I also think some of these other things were going on too with the military or paramilitary or drugs and so forth. There was a lot going on then. There were definitely some secret projects that needed to be kept top secret. But I think they're looking for this. They know this. Somebody, obviously, if someone set up the Indrid Cold story with the symbolism of the Garuda there, they would also know that the Garuda was there at these vortexes. September 10th, 2005. Tomorrow is the 4th anniversary of the World Trade Center disaster, tragedy, which is really where this story started, and 4 years later, it's going to end. At least this part of it. That's an article that. Oops. I have to remember to leave the printer door open so the paper can come out. This is an article, explosive residue found on failed levee debris, the terribly tragic flood in New Orleans 2 weeks ago, or a week ago. This explosion that occurred supposedly at the levee, causing the devastation, would be another in a long line of terrorist events engineered by. That's the question. Engineered by whom? And what is the connection to the Mothman events in that line of events? Because in Keel's Mothman prophecies, there's a lot of talk about prophecies involving assassinations of political figures and other strange, seemingly disconnected things. So, to sort of start here at the very end, I'll tell you where my head's at today on the issue and work backwards as we go into Disc 4, the final 6 hours of The Mothman's Photographer. As I was looking at all the disparate elements of the Mothman story, not only in the Keel book, but in my life, and in the friends and family around me, trying to find an explanation for all of it. Trying to find a map in my mind or a chart. Try to draw a diagram, visualize a diagram that includes all of it and allows it all to make some sort of sense. And I stumbled across a conspiracy theory, conspiracy theorist. She's the queen of conspiracy theorists. Mae Brussel, who died in 1989, I believe, who, over the course of like 20 years or more, researched the JFK, basically starting at the time of the JFK assassination, she researched until 1989, and drew this enormous diagram using mainstream sources, just things that are from mainstream newspapers and the press, to paint a picture of what's really going on behind the scenes. And it's interesting when you take her diagram and you lay it over the Mothman, you find that it all makes sense. Whether or not it's really the truth, who knows? I'm just interested that I found something, and it was via an old connection from Woodward Drive when we were young, down in the neighborhood where the school was, the elementary school, Sarah Jane Moore's house, whose original name was Khan, and that name recently came up in some of my research involving East Coast mob intelligence activity. Could be that she's connected to that by family. I don't have time to research her history, but someone out there may want to do that. Where was I going with that? Oh yes, down in our neighborhood we had a guy who had family in California, and he would occasionally bring back these tapes of a woman radio. It's a radio show, and I always remembered her name as Mae Russell and could find her, but then I realized it was really Mae Brussel, and by looking at her work, stumbled into this excellent template for the overlying Mothman reality. So, but this terrorist event, if this levee was blown, it would fall in line with all the Reichstag, all of these other terrorist events that sort of are linked by this Nazi Odessa-style web of reaching out of Europe, out of Germany, Switzerland, Austria, this power center, money, the world bankers, we might say, who interfaced with the Bush family when they were in the 40s. And Prescott Bush was written up in the New York Times several times for trading with the enemy and being indicted for this and that, because he was a banker funneling millions of dollars to the Nazis from American corporations and backers, because there always has been a very strong Nazi support movement in the United States from these right-wing, wealthy right-wingers. And this Odessa has gone on since the war and spread mostly to North and South America. And Mae Brussel sort of watched these guys and found that they were involved in all the terrorist events, helping to plan them or taking advantage of them, having knowledge of them. According to Brussel, there's a wide-ranging web of interlocking connections between the Vatican, CIA, the mob, military, Middle Eastern oil companies in America, the media, and having taken over the country in 1963 by killing Kennedy. That's sort of the theory, and that these what they couldn't do in Nazi Germany, they sort of had to go underground and come to North and South America, where they're integrated into this intelligence services, and found their way into creating these terrorist events for profit and to increasingly turn North and South America into police states. So, and you can, if you look at most of these big terrorist events, you find connections to the Odessa. And if you look at the Keel story, you find that the Odessa also makes sense in the context of who Maddox was, the man on the bridge that was supposed to have been killed by the bridge, being a Cold War, Vietnam, anti-communist fellow with connections to Bell Helicopter and CIA. Alvis Maddox was tied into the overall paramilitary network. And his son, I think, is the guy who was with one of the key JFK assassination witnesses who was killed in the line of duty, the man who found the extra bullet that disappeared. He was shot and killed at a motel where Alvis Maddox's son, who's also named Alvis Maddox, who was a deputy sheriff, got shot as well, but survived, got shot in the foot. So the Alvis Maddox story ties the Mothman to the JFK assassination quite directly. And well, where do we go next? We could start with the incredible toast. I'm just going to go back. I'm way behind on this stuff. A year behind, probably. Lots of articles and things have happened. Very interesting stuff, which I'm going to try to tie together as succinctly as possible. Here we have the incredible toast, Jesus toast. This was sold on eBay by a woman on the Mothman list who claims to have religious miracles happening in her neighborhood in Youngstown. Her husband's a NASA scientist. She's an astronomer. She's seen lots of shadow people, and reportedly, she's been on the Mothman list the longest of anyone. So she's definitely a key person if you're trying to just look at who's active out there or who's having things happen to them as a Mothman witness. This woman, although she has not seen Mothman, has all these other things going on that you would find in Keel's book. But when I saw a colleague of mine posted this and got kicked off of the list, so and some things were said that aren't true, and I just wanted to clear those up. It was said on the list that I had something against this woman. So I printed out an article. Yes, this is the last email correspondence I had with her. It was claimed that I was mad that she wouldn't support me, my research, and that I'd somehow gotten this toast publicized on the list to discredit her. Although I don't necessarily see why this would discredit you. Although the price, $2.99 for the religious miracle, is kind of a low price. And then she didn't actually send it to the guy, so maybe she came to her senses, realized that it was too valuable. That could be the explanation. So she tells me that she's been working on a book. 6 chapters were typed and they disappeared from her computer. And I was thinking, well, that was probably, maybe she's being watched by NASA, someone her husband works with, if she's writing about this topic. And NASA does seem to be involved in here and there. That was what I was thinking, and I just. But she mentioned she makes a sort of a crack saying, what's the problem, Andy? Because I had written I was thinking that it was my feeling that a lot of the posts that you would make and I think some of the email is being, if you're a Mothman researcher, I think some of your email may be being looked at. Your posts, some of the activity on the lists is a little suspicious. This woman wrote me asking my opinion about some psychic things in her family, and at that time I was a little suspicious of some of the responses that I had gotten from her and other people as well. There seems to be an anti-government conspiracy camp. They don't want there to be any real talk of a government or paramilitary involvement in the Mothman. So they're there saying things, doing things a little suspicious, so it makes me not really want to go, really reveal much to her, or just to be cautious. And that was pretty much all I did, was I was just being very cautious. And she writes me, well, I had written her to ask any problems with, are you actually seeing my messages on the list? Because I was getting the feeling that a lot of people were somehow not even seeing my posts to the list. There's a certain thing that would happen if you post something that's very, let's say it might take another little, might add another little piece of good information to the Mothman, solving the story. Some people would react in certain ways that you could sort of see a pattern. And and one of the patterns was that it didn't seem like some people were even seeing my messages. So she writes back, I just said, did you please email, let me know if you received this email. That was what I said. And she said, yes, I got it, Andy. What seems to be the problem? Someone blocking you at the group, meaning the moderator or someone in control of the apparatus at Yahoo, I don't know. Or is something else blocking you? With the way she words it, or something else blocking you, sort of has an allusion to some mysterious force watching me or something. It just has a foreboding quality to it, and I didn't quite know where she was coming from, so all I said back was, what do you mean by that? And she writes, well, something else having to do with the computer, blah, blah, blah. I wouldn't have put it past things being able to disrupt computers and what you do on them. And so she tells the story of losing 6 chapters in a book, da-da-da-da-da. And then basically to put a little fear out there about the whole process, it's going to disappear, da-da-da. And I don't know if this stuff's really happening to this woman, or she's just trying to suggest things to me, sort of a post-hypnotic or subconscious hypnotic thing. Because it's not a real overt. If there's a real issue about security, just come out and say it. If you know something about computer viruses, and you say that. But if you're just hinting at mysterious forces that are going to somehow block your research, to me, it's hard to know what's going on there. The toast, the Jesus toast, was found indirectly and randomly due to the fact that we were trying to follow up as to whether or not Lauren Coleman was selling a white alligator on eBay, calling himself the world's greatest cryptozoologist. And I had previously on the list asked Lauren if he really was the world's greatest cryptozoologist. And ended up getting into an argument with him, and then now it's being said that I drove him off of the list, which, I mean, I can't drive anyone off of a list. I'm not the moderator. The moderator is the only person that can drive people off the list, as he did my friend who found the Coleman listing on eBay, but it was taken down. So all we have, it was immediately taken down, but all we have is the number of it, 56127774742. I actually didn't get to print it out in time. It all happened so fast. As soon as it was posted that Lauren was calling himself the world's greatest cryptozoologist again, he had denied it the first time and said it was an editor or someone who had done it. This time we had him red-handed on his own eBay sale doing it. And it turned out that this woman who sells the toast had bought several items from Lauren. So we just looked at her record and found this piece of toast that she was selling. So as soon as it came out about the toast and the Lauren Coleman alligator ad was taken off. So there's no one can prove now that Lauren is calling himself the world's greatest cryptozoologist. Although I think he perhaps is the world's greatest cryptozoologist. Yes, so I got blamed for kicking Lauren off, and then this lady with the toast said she was going to quit. And there have been a couple of other people who are friends of Lauren who have quit the list because they haven't liked something I've said. But this lady, or this here, I'm described as being as driven out Lauren Coleman and a Mothman witness named Robin. Now, I'm not described as a Mothman witness. I'm described as a man named Andy Colvin came onto the list, even though I'm a local and I lived there. And the moderator is not from the area. But I'm described by the moderator as a man named Andy Colvin. And she's described as a legitimate Mothman witness because she's only giving her story to Lauren Coleman. And I had asked her what her story was once and didn't get an answer. And then she said that I had stolen I was trying to steal her story. Simply because I had asked months before what had happened to her, just like a one-sentence description, anything. So then it's said that Andy emailed other members asking them to put in a good word with the moderator. Well, I have the email here that says all I said was, please email and let me know if you received it. Here it is. And it says, are my posts appearing on your screen? That's it. Nothing about please put in a good word to the moderator. And supposedly, because she wouldn't put in a good word for me, then I became very angry at her and accused her of making up all of her stories, which I've never done. I've never accused her of making up any of her stories. Anyway, Andy has greatly disliked her ever since for not helping him out. Totally untrue. Anyway. So my friend who revealed the toast auction was kicked off summarily without any warning. Okay. Now what? There is May Brussels' website. Here's some tapes you can buy. 500, 600, 800, I can't remember, several hundred shows that May Brussels did on the radio back in the day. Also, right over here next to it, we have this article. Let's see. Right there. Drops into the elk. That's a story that was uncovered recently that amazingly explains everything that happened during the Mothman Tour 2002 when we went to the energy field in North Charleston, and by standing in that place that we stood with the energy field, I was able to see a vision of the drownings at the confluence of the Elk and Kanawha rivers. This collapse of a bridge happened right at that spot in 1804. On the same date, December 15th, as the Silver Bridge collapsed in 1967. So, very similar incidents with a connection through the Mothman, from the Mothman events, from the Silver Bridge date, the name game, connection to the Elk River collapse, to Woodward Drive, where I saw the vision of it. And another fact that has come forth is that at that spot where the energy field is, or was, in 2002, is where there was once a school building. It was the first school on Woodward Drive in what was then called Mound, West Virginia. This is a very old town. It dates back to the 1700s. Called Mound because it had thousands of Indian mounds. And this is where the Union Carbide plant is. They mowed all the mounds down, changed the name to North Charleston. You have Union Carbide on the island in the middle of the river there. You have it on both sides of the river. And you have a Navy reservation that all that land is basically owned by the Navy. Because Charleston was so important during pioneer days for its salt mines. So, strategic point, became a Navy reservation very early on at this spot in the river, because there's an island, one, because of the salt mines, because of its strategic spiritual importance to the Indians. It had to be taken over very early by the Navy. So that's part of the whole connection to the Tad Jones sighting, too. Tad Jones alluding to shape-shifting, the multiple footprints, Union Carbide land. It's the same spot where I saw something flying behind our car. Same spot where Sharon Moore, who we interviewed last time, saw those glowing symbols. That would all be within a couple of blocks of the I-64 bridge in St. Albans. I'm sorry, in Dunbar, which is basically at the west end of Mound, West Virginia. Mound sort of encompasses the area from Two Mile Creek, Hannah Drive, Woodward Drive, Tyler Mountain Road, Roxelania Road. What's next? So that was an amazing coincidence. I've figured out what that vision was all about in our last episode, in our last 2002 tour. Another interesting thing that's come up is that I found out recently that my father was stationed in Norfolk, Virginia in 1943, which means he was there when the Philadelphia experiment occurred. What does this mean? Well, it's hard to say. I looked at the yearbook that I have. I have a yearbook showing him there, the dates. It sounds like they were liaisoning with the French Navy, possible intelligence thing. It's called Waves. The guys there were called Waves, which has a CIA ring to it because the Navy, in conjunction with the CIA, set up the Miami JM Wave CIA station. It was always called JM Wave. So I don't know if that's a connection or if that's just a name game thing. But my dad was Navy. He was there for the Philadelphia experiment. It's not listed on his military records, interestingly, even though I have proof that he was there. And I have a letter from his sister on the computer, on email, saying that she remembers him being there. She actually visited him there in Norfolk at that time. and that the family was questioned about his, so he had a security clearance, some kind of security thing going on because they were interviewing people about his character. And I don't think they did that for every Navy recruit. He was listed as transient personnel, which is kind of a utility guy thing. I mean, or he was in training, but who knows how much training. We have an article from those days from the newspaper showing he and his brother and 2 brothers-in-law all going into the military. It was about all of them, and my dad was mentioned as being getting special training in Washington, D.C. at the National Bureau of Standards. Again, this doesn't appear on his military records. So it makes one wonder, well, first of all, he may have been even there, supposedly after the Philadelphia experiment occurred, and for those of you who don't know it, it's a case where the Einstein helped the Navy bombard a ship with degaussing waves and electromagnetism, the same waves that you would erase a tape with, or something magnetic with, and super high voltages of this, causing the ship to disappear, teleport to Norfolk from Philadelphia, and then back to Philadelphia. And then supposedly there was a brawl that night or that weekend among sailors who were involved because they kept disappearing. And of course we all laugh when we hear this. Interestingly, my aunt told me that my dad went to Philadelphia after Norfolk, after he left there. And the most amazing thing of all in this story is that I later heard from my stepfather, not my real father, who we're speaking of here, but my stepfather who came later. And I didn't see this, but I heard from my stepfather and from other people who worked at a DuPont plant in Charleston, West Virginia, that men had been seen catching on fire and disappearing, running on fire, disappearing. And this is exactly what reportedly has happened to people that were involved in the Philadelphia experiment. They have a propensity to catch on fire, appear and disappear, and are in many cases gone forever. Unfortunately, there's very little evidence. So here's my father. In this Navy yearbook. Interestingly, there's another guy here also from Charleston, whom I recognized when I saw this. His name is Lawrence Carpenter. My sister married a carpenter for a while, a guy named Carpenter. Yeah, these are called transient personnel. I guess they're in training, or else they're spies, one or the other. And there's somewhere in here, there's a date having to do with the 1943. It's, what does it say here? Sort of back here at the beginning, we find a description. They do a brief history. There's a brief history of the U.S. Naval Receiving Station. In May '43, one of the enlisted men's barracks was converted into a barracks for the housing of wave personnel. The first group of waves was received in June '43. In 1943, a group of Quonset huts were turned over to the French to take care of the housing of their transient personnel in this area. So that's kind of interesting. 3 schools were established: a lookout school, a radio refresher school, and a signal refresher school, none of which my dad did. He was a machinist, aircraft machinist. Captain T.S. McCloy was the head of it. John J. McCloy, I don't know if there's a relation. Apparently they're not brothers, I've been told by a researcher, because McCloy didn't have any brothers. John J. McCloy was a super, super important CIA linked high-level bureaucrat who supposedly, more than any other person, shaped Cold War policy for the military and for the government after the war. John J. McCoy. Could be that someone in his family was my father's commander. Here he is, T.S. McCoy. There was something else in here that looked interesting. What was that? It was a shot of Teddy Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt was apparently hated one of my ancestors for plant Colvin, who was responsible for turning the Adirondacks into a state park. Single-handedly surveyed the entire area, which is bigger than the Yosemite and I think Yellowstone put together. Verplanck spent many years on that project and then lobbied as a state legislator, lobbied to have it turned into a national park, thus thwarting Teddy and his British buddies who wanted to take over and have that part of New York be part of Canada. Teddy was not the patriot everyone thinks. He had ties to the, quote, world bankers that we've heard about in the Keel literature before, representing these wealthy elites that cross geographical boundaries and who start wars and profit from them. Teddy was not a friend of the Colvins. And interesting though, later my father told me once when we were visiting the Roosevelt estate in Hyde Park, New York, that he had flown a biplane there. It's made no sense. My dad wasn't even supposed to be a pilot. So it shows that there's possibly some connection between my father and the Roosevelts as well. I think that, my dad spoke of interagency battles, Navy. He was Navy, but his own brother was Army, for instance. Shot of my father here, his brother, Thomas, who went into the Army and was stationed in Kentucky. Kentucky turns out to be, Kentucky, Ohio, and West Virginia, all very important in the military base of the country. Have a lot of German immigrants there who came over in the 1800s. Cincinnati, Columbus, highly German, so that when this Odessa came in and after World War II with the Nazis, they were absorbed into the Ohio area. These strong Catholics, strong anti-communists. The Vatican helped these scientists, Nazi scientists, come over to the United States in Operation Paperclip, which was run by Pope John Paul II's mentor. Pope John Paul II actually worked in that office for a while. And he also worked for I.T. Farben in Auschwitz during the war, selling gas, selling the gas that was actually used in the camps. This is something that Mae Russell has talked about in her research. And it's something that they completely want to get away from in the stories of John Paul II. He's not supposed to be known as a Nazi, but he was. And that explains why John Paul II shows up in the Mothman prophecies, because he's part of this Odessa complex, this network that the Mothman, I think, perhaps was intended to expose, simply by having all of these things show up in the prophecies of the various witnesses. John Paul, RFK, connections between Union Carbide in Canada and the Martin Luther King assassination. The assassin, James R. Ray, used information he could have only gotten from a top secret Union Carbide plant in Canada to build his alias, the Eric Galt alias. Only if he had gone to the secret files of this top secret Union Carbide plant in Canada could you have known who Eric Galt was, because he was a real person who worked there, but his identity was stolen by James R. Ray. How did I get onto Union Carbide? I don't know. But my uncle was in the Army there in Fort Campbell, Kentucky, which is where now the helicopter corps are based. All the helicopters that were made by Bell Helicopter, and Alvis Maddox was one of their big employees, high-level employee. Alvis Maddox of Silver Bridge fame. My uncle stationed there. Now the helicopter place. Also the place where the gold in Fort Knox was kept. And my half-brother worked, stationed at Fort Knox back in the 80s. Told me that the gold was no longer there. He knew that. He couldn't tell me exactly why, but he said it was not there. It had been taken. And this is the conspiracy theory put forth by Peter D. Beater, the great conspiracy theorist of that day, of the 70s, former JFK cabinet member who ran against Governor Rockefeller in the 70-something governor election. Peter Beater would do radio tapes, radio broadcasts about the gold conspiracy, that the Rockefellers had stolen the gold out of Fort Knox, and then we went off the gold standard after the gold was taken. So once the gold was stolen and we didn't need the gold, and in other words, going off of the gold standard was a good way to hide the whole scandal, because there was a scandal. And Peter D. Beater was one of the main guys pushing for an investigation of the gold in Fort Knox, which ended with a very limited investigation. No one really knows what happened to the gold. But I think one of the theories that I see some potential in for the Mothman is that they were moving this gold through. Supposedly, according to Beater, 66 was the year that they would have been doing most of the moving. So 66, 67. So that means that could be the whole thing behind the secrecy in Point Pleasant. The gold was being moved through, perhaps being changed from train to boat or something like that. An explanation for the reason why the Greek mob was supposedly there at the time. It falls into this same neat explanation, actually. People calling themselves the Greek mob were there, but at that very time in Greece, there was something called Operation Chaos, and it was a liaison between the CIA and certain right-wing factions in Europe who were doing terrorism, and there was a lot of Greek activity between these mobsters in Greece and the CIA, doing jobs for the CIA. So these guys in Point Pleasant may have actually been CIA contract agents. Perhaps they weren't even really Greek, but the fact that the story was floated means that someone's wanting us to look there, to look to what was happening in Greece then, and of course it was Operation Chaos, which is a plan to disrupt the peace movements, the labor movements. Giving credence to my idea that perhaps some of these guys were in town, these men in black were there to scare labor, scare people who were fighting for better wages, like my father, who some of these people I feel could have been experimented on, could have been abducted, injected with truth serum, injected with things to kill them. We know that a lot of men at Union Carbide died of certain strange chemical exposures causing very rare cancers. At that very time in history, in '66, you had known instances of people being shot up with live cancer cells. The book Mary Ferry and the Monkey Virus, for instance. So this could have been happening. And in fact, it would explain the Frightwig Man. Do we have a picture of Frightwig? We'll find one later. David Ferry of JFK fame, one of the conspirators who was a monkey virus researcher in his spare time and actually wore ape hair on his head. He had alopecia, so he wore an ape fright wig that was made from ape hair. Very scary looking thing. It was orange. And he painted on these fake eyebrows. He was a pilot who flew people around. He flew to Montreal quite often. This is the place where the Union Carbide plant was that we talked about, the secret plant. Was known to have flown. He was known to have called Huntington, West Virginia. He flew in and out of small airports, running drugs and guns. It could be that the heroin that we found in Woodward Drive was from a shipment like this, flying in and out. Reportedly, there was a shipload of, in the book The Bluegrass Conspiracy, a complete full plane of unmarked weapons was found flying out of Huntington. This means that there was a plant in the area making guns, unregistered guns, without serial numbers to be used by hit teams, assassination teams, and black ops around the world, wherever they were sent to. So you could also, it seems like we have a confluence of things, secret operation perhaps training these guys, because in 1966, at the beginning of the Garrison investigation into JFK, he shut down a training camp. It was a training camp for these Cuban assassins, CIA assassins, in New Orleans. Lake Pontchartrain was busted and broken up. It's conceivable that Ferry started flying to West Virginia and training people there, because he was the trainer. And he was caught with a load of weapons that were stolen from a Schlumberger oil, it's an oil company, from a mining operation that they had down there. Schlumberger has offices in West Virginia, and I have a friend who worked there for a while. And they're tied in with the old British-Swiss network from way back, Schlumberger. British-Swiss CIA kind of connections to the world bankers, to the same group. Like today you would have the Carlyle Group funding billions of dollars of weapons, making money off of the Iraq War, and Halliburton. These are all Bush Cheney type companies. Oil companies interface with them in various ways. So there's interagency rivalry, Army Navy. I think there was probably some of that going on. There was a big shakeup in the CIA at that time, '66. Lots of spies were being outed. Spies look for counter espionage. There was a big shakeup by Jesus Angleton, James Jesus Angleton, who was the counter-terror chief of the CIA. And that explains how you get into these bombings, car bombings, like Harriet's father being car bombed. Well, there was the only other reference I can find at that time to car bombings comes out of Cleveland at that time, in a book about Victor Ostrovsky, the FBI KGB double agent, who was stationed in Cleveland. He was a Russian working undercover for the FBI. There were some car bombings in the Cleveland area in Ohio of again, labor, people that were activists, or in the case of Harriet's dad, guys who were engineers at some of these top secret plants who were being asked for information, and if they refused, they would be bombed and intimidated in various ways. And so there's a lot of this. The Russians trying to get information. You have the Americans trying to stop that information from getting through. You have American agents just wanting a little extra money, or engineers selling a little bit of information here or there, and who knows what was going on. But interagency rivalry is certainly a possibility. What else do we have? My father's military record page. Here you can see what it says he did. There's no mention of Norfolk in there. There's no mention of the National Bureau of Standards, which is in here, which is listed here. Of course, that could have just been training for machinist work. But so it's really an enormous subject. There's a web of interconnecting things coming from different places. They sound like they're all unrelated, but according to Mae Brussels' work, they're all connected. Now, this doesn't mean that this is all that the Mothman is about. He's not all about conspiracy. But the important thing about Mothman is not to try to figure out if he's a demon or whatever, is to figure out what's the historical context. And the only people who have really studied these flying men are the sort of the Eastern peoples. You know, India, Tibet, Middle East, Iraq, the Persians, Sumerians. There's a lot of information there about what the symbolism is, so that no matter when you're born and when you see this creature, you kind of have an idea of what he's about. That's the important thing, I think. And what he's about is, number one, represents the opposite of light. He's the void. He's the shadow. He's the conspiracy, if you will. He represents that. Because he's fighting those things. His job is to carry the world through difficult times. And the difficult times are usually caused by people doing the wrong thing on purpose. Terrorism, scams, having wars to make money. These are things that the Garuda would try to expose, and the only way he can really expose it to people is to work through people's minds and through the way people interact and communicate, and that is to give them symbols, give them signs, give them things to look at to make the connections. And that's why the witnesses to this bird end up getting these prophecies. To put the pieces together, people need to communicate what those pieces are. And it's a super, super important survival mode for humanity. It's an ancient. I should bring some sculptures up. Ancient supernatural creature. It's a deity. His role is to save us, help us save ourselves, and we need to look at symbols that he's giving us. Interesting. I just found, where's that? Interesting. Here we have the flight patterns from 911. Now, if you recall, this whole thing got started off because I realized that we had this precognition of 911 as a kid, so there's some connection to all this with 911. And if you look at the people that profited from 911 and the various systems of the U.S. government that had to be shut down in order for it to work, you run across the same World Banker types, the same Halliburton types, the big military contractors. On this day in history, 911, they had 3 or 4, I think 4 different exercises for the Air Force. One was Air Force, one was CIA, involving planes crashing into buildings. One was two real planes that they were supposed to fly and catch. There were some fake planes that were on the screens for the terminal people who were running the terminal operations to try to figure out which ones were fake and which ones were real. These are military exercises, all under the umbrella of Dick Cheney. And for information on this topic, you can check out this book, 911 Synthetic Terror by Tarpley. He goes into all that stuff. If you're looking for Nazi and occult connections, Peter Levinda, he's got 3 books coming out in a row here having to do with the whole Odessa thing and how they spread out over North and South America. In a book like The Nazi Hunters, you can read about Operation Paperclip and how all these scientists were brought into America, and a lot of them ended up in Columbus. And I think a lot of them probably ended up in Charleston, just like my father, if you had worked around this Philadelphia experiment, which, by the way, was Einstein was involved in that experiment. I think they may have sent a lot of these guys to Charleston to keep an eye on them. If they were going to explode, disappear, and catch into flames, or whatever they're going to do, they wanted them. You would think that they would want to keep an eye on them, and a good place would be an out-of-the-way industrial installation on Navy land, like Mound, West Virginia. But anyway, the interesting thing about this flight pattern is that the flight that hit the Pentagon flew right over Sugar Grove, the secret Navy base, and on its way out it flew over Romney, which was the other base that we went to with Harriet. So if these are control areas where there's, high-level communications with military communications, it would make sense that they would fly over these. Maybe it wouldn't matter, but anyway, it seems interesting to me that and over here, literally, they're flying over Point Pleasant. So the same plane hit all three of the key spots that we went to on the Mothman tour, 2002. And then the Shanksville plane that was, quote, forced down but probably shot down, flew out to Cleveland and turned around. Cleveland keeps coming up. This is the same spot in Cleveland, near Cleveland, where the big power outage was last year, the big New York power outage. It was at 2004, right? 2004? Supposedly caused by a plant there, a nuclear power plant there. I don't know if it was nuclear or not. So, this Cleveland thing. The last time Cleveland came up was a couple of weeks ago on the Mothman list. The daughter of Woody Derenberger said that Indrid Cold was in Cleveland. Not only was Indrid Cold speaking to Woody Derenberger in West Virginia, but Indrid was in Cleveland. And when people asked about this, no more, she clammed up. She doesn't want to talk about it. So we find Cleveland was also the place where David Ferry, who I mentioned earlier, the CIA pilot, who could have been Frightwig, seen by Marcella Bennett. Cleveland is where he grew up. And where a lot of these guys go to escape prosecution. For instance, another of the JFK conspirators who was going to be brought up by Garrison in '67, Gordon Novell, fled to Columbus, where he was protected by Governor Rhodes and not extradited to New Orleans for trial. So Columbus is sort of this little right-wing protection zone, connecting the Ohio Valley with New Orleans. This whole river traffic that had been, strategic river traffic that had been taken over by the military in the 1800s. So these are old military strong communities, systems that have a long history of not only military but corruption as well. The Ohio River is where the original Las Vegas mob came from. They came from northern Kentucky, Lexington, Cincinnati, Newport. These were all mobsters under they increasingly came under the wing of the Philadelphia mob, and then the New York mob, and eventually the Meyer-Lansky international big huge drug network that built Vegas and built Havana and Miami. The whole seed of that came out of northern Kentucky. It was broken up in 1960 by a zealous sheriff who forced Newport to go clean, and all of these guys had to go elsewhere. So they basically moved the whole operation to Las Vegas. In the wake of this, we had a vacuum occurring in northern Kentucky and southern Ohio in the area of the Mothman. A mob vacuum, so to speak, where there's a reshuffling. People were gone, moved to Vegas, taken over by Lansky, taken over by some of the same people that were involved in the JFK assassinations and some of the other assassinations as street level guys. After that rousing introduction, let us move on to a phone interview that I did with my sister, Spring. Spring is only 3 years older than me, so she can verify a lot of my story for anyone who's interested in doing that. She remembers the interrogation that we had by Men in Black. Has lots of dreams relating to Mothman, has lots of psychic. She's very psychic and tells people things about them, what's going to happen in their lives all the time. And I think we talk about one of these in the interview. Some guy named Housecat, whose nickname was Housecat. And she also talks about the tsunami that occurred a few months ago in Indonesia, that she had been having dreams about it prior, and she had told me about these dreams prior, so I can verify that she did indeed know what was coming. What else? I was just watching a little TV here during the break, and Alexander Haig has a TV show now where he talks about security issues. And Haig is a good example of the kind of person that is involved in this Odessa that probably is behind this Odessa, probably being behind some of the Mothman conspiracy angles. Haig is a powerful Catholic. He's a member of the Knights of Malta, the secret Masonic type of group that is aligned with the Vatican. It's a high-level American military leaders aligned with the Vatican. And Haig had many scandals breaking in the early 80s when he was in the Reagan administration. A big scandal broke in Italy involving the assassination teams, Michael Sindona, who was a Vatican investor who was moving money from the Vatican into American companies and back and forth, and drug money and this and that. The whole complex sort of coming together there in that scandal, which was covered up. A lot of it was covered in the press. Mae Brussel covered a lot of it, and it spread to the Reagan administration, the Bush was more tied into it than Reagan. Reagan was really an outsider from California, whereas Bush was tied in with the old DC network, CIA network that was in Dallas. Bush was one of the Dallas JFK liaison investigators for the CIA. It's funny to see Alexander Haig still at it. And I just noticed that I see Lauren Coleman has posted an email describing himself as a born Confederate in Norfolk, Virginia, a Navy brat. I didn't know that Lauren Coleman was a Navy brat and was born in Norfolk, where my dad was stationed. And I'm wondering, based on Lauren's age, yeah, that was right around the time. Lauren, I don't know exactly when he was born, but he would have been born right around the same time that my dad was there. Interesting thing about this Major Downing story that we covered in the first segment was that Major Downing. I looked up Major Downing, and this is a figure from the 1800s. Someone is using a fake name of a real person. Someone's falsely using the name of a real person from the 1800s who wrote books. Or Major Downing was the subject of some books. He was supposed to be a militiaman, but he's from Portland, Maine. So here you have someone passing off in 1998 on the UFO websites and things, this story about Major Downing, the Mothman, and it's connected to Portland, Maine, and it's connected to Sony Pictures. And back in 1998, before the Mothman movie came out, no one was researching Mothman, really, hardly at all. So where does a person who has connections to Sony Pictures back then and is interested in that movie that came out at that time called Men in Black, and was also involved in Mothman at that time? No one, except maybe Lauren Coleman. And the connection to the Portland, Maine thing makes one think that this story was floated about Major Downing and the black dogs in West Virginia and the electromagnetic experimentation on people. This was planted by someone who wanted us to look at Lauren Coleman as part of it, as part of the scenario. But I'll go into Major Downing a little more later, because we talk about Indrid Cold coming up in another reporting in segment. All right. So that dream you were having, was that about that tsunami?
Yep.
Yeah.
That was like 3 months ago.
Oh, I thought you were having them.
Well, I've been having dreams about, but the one I had 3 months ago was I thought it was going to be in Japan.
Well, I thought you were in the building, or you felt like you were there or something.
Yeah.
But you didn't mention Japan before.
Well, I thought that's where I thought it was going to be. But anyway, why?
Just curious,
Okay.
because I saw an image on TV and it looked like the description that I gave. I don't know if you remember this, but I asked you some questions about what it looked like,
Yeah.
and I don't think I wrote down the description, but
When the last time we talked,
yeah,
before it happened?
correct.
Yeah.
I don't think I took notes or I didn't record it or anything, but
All the water was coming through.
yeah, you said you were in a building, and I can't remember if it was
I didn't know where I was.
right. Was it a glass?
It's like that all the time.
I think I asked you how tall it was and if it was glass or not.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. But anyway, I saw some footage and I thought, well, that looks like what Spring told me about, and immediately I realized that that's what you had probably had dreamt of. Have you had any other kinds of?
No, I had a dream 3 months ago. I told somebody about. I said there's going to be a really, really bad earthquake. There's going to be a lot of water, and it was just a dream I had. And I've passed it off like another nightmare, which I have all the time. I've passed it off, and that's so terrible. Isn't it awful?
Yeah.
That
So
all those people.
there's some terrible stories there. Do you have any? I recently got wind that a Mothman was seen near San Francisco.
Oh,
What?
you're kidding.
Oh no, people see him. People see him all the time. Not all the time, but they see him in different places. But no, there's something more to this one, because like there was one down in Georgia that I interviewed the people and
Right?
it was like, okay, what does that mean? And it didn't really mean anything. But this one,
Is it the same looks the same? Or what?
yeah, they're seeing Mothman pretty.
It's really weird.
Now, but here's the thing about this last one. The lady that saw it over a shell refinery, and it appears from her description that it's the same refinery that I kept poking around at when I was down there a couple of years ago doing my hypnotherapy, and it's because it was on this ridge and with these beautiful views, and I kept trying to get up there to see the view, take pictures.
Yeah?
And I think she said she saw it right over that one. And then it's a little unclear from where the description of where she was, but this particular refinery is on a waterway that connects to another town.
What do you think he's trying to do?
No,
Warn people or what?
No, I'm just saying. Does that mean? Have you had anything about San Francisco? Well, because somebody else. Another person I interviewed thinks that San Francisco is going to have some terrorism or something, maybe one of the bridges, and
The dogs are upset.
The what?
My dogs are getting upset.
About what?
They're scratching at the door.
Right now?
Yeah,
Why?
I don't know. Anyway, I don't know.
What's that?
I don't know.
Okay.
They had this thing on TV about the animals knew beforehand. Well, animals always know beforehand when something happens. That's why they run.
And did you find any more about polecat? House cat?
Who?
House cat?
Who?
House cat.
Outcast.
House cat. Some guy that you told he was going to have a car wreck?
I saw him today. He said he was fine. He said, I'm fine. I didn't die like you said. And I said, well, I didn't tell you were going to die. I just said you were get hurt. And he goes, well, he had 23 stitches on his eye.
Wow.
One eye.
And that was a couple of weeks ago?
Yep. I don't like it.
Because
I just keep my mouth shut.
well, a couple of weeks ago, that's when I found that thing in the photo that you sent me.
Yeah.
And that's also when Aunt Mary died.
Yeah, I know she died.
And it's also something else. I had a dream of Ezekiel's wheel
Oh my God.
over from Kmart parking lot looking toward Blaine Island.
That's weird.
And it was very realistic and very powerful. And then
What do you think that means?
well, wait a minute. I then, actually, I think it may have been right before. Right before that, I had found an image of from the 1100s of Ezekiel's wheel, and there's a winged being that's supposed to go along with the chariot. And I don't know if that influenced my dream or not, but it wasn't a Mothman dream. It was just a dream of this wheel.
Ezekiel was a prophet in the Old Testament.
Yeah. But the weird thing is that yesterday I was reading an article that I was just doing keyword searches, put in NASA, West Virginia, and I found an article written by a guy who had worked on a project at West Virginia State that involved low level, extremely low frequency signals, and I guess he was pulled off on a secret side project which involved going around the Kanawha Valley and doing like looking for aliens, and I guess the NASA and some people like that are monitoring or trying to get in touch with the other dimensions. That he basically said that NASA is, even in the talks that they give that are public, they're talking more about exploring other dimensions rather than outer space. And one of the things he was a Christian, and he was sort of writing it from a Christian perspective, and he said that they want to bring, there was a mention of Ezekiel's wheel in
Did you dream about it before that you saw that?
Did who? What?
Ezekiel's wheel. Did you dream about it before you heard about it?
I'm trying to remember. It was like a couple of months ago or longer. It was months ago when I stumbled across a drawing that had a winged being along with Ezekiel's wheel, and I have no idea how I found it. It was just something I printed out and I kept, and I never thought a thing about it. And then I had this dream, and then I read this article after the dream and he claims that NASA wants to bring back an Ezekiel's wheel type scenario where people will see it. And that was what he said. He said they were trying to recreate an Ezekiel's, and that's the exact word he used.
Oh, that's freaky.
Well, they could create this and have people see it and create, a religion around it, or...
How about Jacob's ladder?
What do you mean?
How about the Tower of Babel? Oh, yeah.
Well, I don't know. Well, yeah, I think he mentioned Babel, too.
Yeah.
Well, why did you say that?
That's where everybody crawls up on the tower and they all speak in different languages. That's why God took them up on the tower and confused their languages so they could all be different and make them more creative.
Right.
That's my interpretation.
What was one of the most recent things you talked to Dad about?
You want to know?
Yeah.
I don't want to cry. You want me to tell you?
Yeah.
Okay. You remember Ted that stole your camera?
Yeah.
I kept thinking, we broke up, and I kept trying to think he'd be, I allowed him to be my friend. And, he stole the $8,000 diamond ring John got me. Because I took it off because I was doing artwork. I let him come over here and eat lunch. He stole my ring. And I went over to his apartment, and he pulled a knife. I said, "Where's my ring? That's not your ring, that's John's ring. That's his family heirloom." I said, "I want it back. I know you have it." He pulled a knife on my neck, pulled my hair back, and threatened to kill me. And I got out without being killed. And I got in the car, I came home, and I had a fucking nervous breakdown. And John was truck driving at the time, and he came home and he took me to the police department. And They took a picture of my arm where he grabbed me. And it's been going on for 4 months. They keep letting me come back to court. And he paid for the ring to be reset. I got the ring back. That's an admission of guilt. They have a picture of my arm. And I keep thinking I should drop it because it makes me so upset. Because I don't want to. They'll put me up on the court stand. They already did it once. It made me feel like a whore.
And he doesn't have a family connection or somebody who's powerful that kind of makes sure that things go his way or anything like that?
No. No.
Was he in the military?
No.
No? Not in the was never in the military?
No.
Does he?
That one.
He's a hairdresser. It doesn't make sense. Did he ever? What are some of the things the guy's done in his life? Like anything? Any? Marshall? What's that?
He used to drug traffic.
Drug traffic. See, yeah. Well, that's what I'm talking about.
Long time ago.
Well, but you don't know like who his.
Knew him.
What?
Not that I know when I knew him.
But like, is he the Italians? I mean, if you could plug him in.
No. A little farmer redneck.
Farmer.
From Indiana.
He's from Indiana?
Yeah.
What town?
I don't know.
Okay.
Anyway.
Is he a police informant? Hello?
Not that I know of. No, the lieutenant, the detective that came over here told me, he says, I know who he is. And he said, I'm coming over taking more pictures of your arm. And I had to go out in the front porch and they took more pictures of my arm where he grabbed me. So they have evidence that he assaulted me.
Did he ever work for a car company?
No.
Used car lot, junkyard?
No.
Does he have a farm? Does he have any property?
Yeah.
Where is it?
In Indiana.
It's in Indiana.
Yeah.
You've never been there?
No.
What's he doing here? If he's got property in Indiana?
His mom lives there. He's not allowed in there because they don't allow. Somebody was going to kill him over drugs.
Huh. What's he deal, mostly?
What did he deal? He
What?
dealt in cocaine.
Cocaine?
But supposedly not for, 12 years ago.
Hmm. He's just one of the most scary individuals I've ever met.
I know, Andy.
And it's not.
He scares me. He haunts me.
And I'm not saying that because.
No, I'm telling you, he haunts me in my mind. He is a fucking scary. He's like a fucking wizard.
I know, and that's why I think there's more. I don't know. I'm just trying to fish around. I don't want to make any grand statements, but there's something about him and his connection, and I just suspect that he's. I suspect that there's some other stuff there that.
I know that.
That I may have dreamed about myself.
My lawyer looked up on the computer, and the only thing they had on him was a false police statement that was dismissed. That was it. That was all.
See, that's unbelievable.
Wait, there's got to be more than that.
That's unbelievable.
I know. There's got to be more than that.
Nothing nationwide? Nothing?
Nothing. That was it.
See, and he really works at a beauty parlor?
Yeah.
And he really does. He really goes there and cuts hair.
Every day.
January 6, 2005. We're here with Mercedes. Code name. Do you have a code name?
No.
Like Spider... I don't know. Whatever.
No.
Spider.
Spider is somebody else's name.
Blue Lady. I don't know.
Blue lady. Legs on a leash.
1605. We're looking into the tsunami and folks who've had premonitions of that. Mercedes did have some things, as well as her boyfriend. So Would you mind giving us a quick rundown on that? What happened the night of the
Sure. The night of the tsunami.
the night of the tsunami?
I had crazy dreams all night long. I had really anxious, panicky dreams in which I was fighting with everyone in my life, just these repeated arguments. And my life has been pretty stable without much disruption. So I couldn't understand the panic that I was having all evening, really explosive energy, as though I was witness to it. And at the same time, my boyfriend, who was sleeping next to me, when he woke up and said that he'd had a very bad nightmare. And in the nightmare, he was sitting in the balcony of a theater, about to watch a play, and a woman comes out of nowhere and runs directly past him and off the balcony and leaps to her death on the stage. And anyway, he woke up in a panic. I had had these crazy, wild dreams, and it was just like disruption that night. I think it's the first night that we'd actually experienced nightmares so strongly together.
Any other things that have happened in the last few months? It's been a while since we checked in with you.
Oh, in the last few months, I've done ghost tours for the Pike Place Market, and that's been really fascinating. I've been doing a lot of research into some of the buildings and some of the history of Seattle, and I've also had some really incredible experiences with the entities down in the market, especially in the Butterworth Mortuary, which is a large space that's usually occupied by a restaurant. In fact, I just dreamed about that. I dreamed that there was a business going into it. I have to look and see if it is what I dreamt. Anyway, that mortuary has become a really prominent thing for me in my life. And I have someone I'm working with who's a historian who's going to actually research some of the stories around it and all the entities that live there. There are about 14 entities within the building. We know that it operated as a morgue as well as a makeshift morgue / hospital at one point, as well as a mortuary. And there is a very bloody time in Seattle history in which it's possible that some of the people that came through were not dead, and perhaps died within that building, and were of mixed race, Native, French, English. And there's a really interesting part of Seattle history that makes me think of the market in a totally different way. Makes me think of the ghosts down there in a totally different way. I've always thought of them as very peaceful entities, and I've come across two that are not this year, who are very angry. And funny enough, at the same time I come across them, I meet people who are studying the history, who have, it all happens together. It's like they're trying to tell me their stories.
That's something I've been noticing, is that there seems to be a code built into the, at least with in terms of my research in the Mothman world, I'm seeing that it's trying to tell a story. The entity is trying to tell a story, and people are misreading. I think they're not looking at the symbols. They're looking at, I don't know, the glitz or the death curse, or the Mothman death curse. Have you heard of that? Anyway,
I can imagine what it is, though.
So, what do you think? Do you have anything to say about how to read the code, the symbols?
Well, I'm becoming more and more a believer of collective consciousness, and that experiences are not individual, and therefore, with anything, kind of like the ripple effect, this goes definitely to the tsunami and the effect on the planet. One small incident, however small, affects many people. And for instance, in working with the paranormal, a ghost that is trying to tell you a story, there are going to be many people that are contacted in some way, shape, or form. Their story is not unique. I mean, the paranormal, the experience of the paranormal, I don't think is unique. The story that that ghost has to offer may be very unique, and I think that they will try multiple ways of reaching you or getting the story out.
In the case of the Mothman, there was a bridge that collapsed.
Right.
And the sightings decreased after that, although they didn't stop. So I think it's sort of a jumping the gun for people to think that there's a connection, that there's that the appearance of this entity had to do with just the bridge. I mean, if it
Right.
continues to be seen, well, what do you think that means when it continues to be seen after an event?
Well,
Just so that,
I mean, this goes to a question of what is death and what is life, and if they're one and the same, if there really is not that much of a division beyond our physical form, then they're living just as we are. Their existence continues. Perhaps they have little fits every once in a while and break bridges.
so do you believe, what about the belief that they move on, that ghosts are supposed to move on? Do you believe that that's a necessary, that they really need to move on?
Well, I personally believe in an idea of heaven and hell, and it's not that we all ascend to heaven, or I think that hell is the point in which an entity is trapped, judging their own life and looking at the things they've done wrong. For instance, the stages of hell and the vices. I think that hell is having to be stuck here and look at the things you've done wrong in your life, and I think heaven is progressing as in your physical form to a point in which you have no regrets at your death, and therefore you can pass on to a much greater world, perhaps one that isn't even here on this planet, that is ascendant, that is enlightened, that is a part of the universe. But I think oftentimes that the entities that we experience are those that are living in some sort of hell, whether it's their personal hell in which they cannot face their own death, or they have such regret over the way they've lived their life, or they have absolute pain because they've never fully experienced or been given the opportunity to fulfill their life. And that's kind of how I see.
What about in the case of the Mothman? We have this chief, this Shawnee Chief Cornstalk, who died in one of the last big Indian battles in the Midwest, probably the biggest. And he was sort of murdered while he was in the stockade, and he put a curse on the town.
Yeah.
And some people think that this bridge collapse and the hauntings by this entity, the Mothman, was a working out of this Indian chief's curse. Do you think that that's the kind of thing that people should be looking at when trying to figure out? In other words, would an entity like you're talking about, a ghost, would it be coming back to work some sort of curse on? And what kind of...
I personally don't believe in that. I don't believe in demons or minions or Satan.
Well, what if it was just the spirit of this chief that was still around? What would he do?
I think the spirit has that kind of potential, certainly. It's hard for
How would
me
he work? How would he work it out? Like how would a spirit like that actually make things happen? Do you think?
See, this is another question. Like, for instance, I really don't believe in curses. I don't think that you actually have the power to curse someone else. I mean, you can definitely have ill will toward them, but unless they acknowledge and receive that curse and believe it is so, I just don't think it's possible.
Okay, let me clarify.
Okay.
What I think is happening is that the media is calling it a curse.
Oh.
People in the media are calling it a curse in order to cover up what could be a code to solve solve the crime. Let's say there was a crime committed, someone gets murdered,
So
and we hear about this. We hear the ghosts come back and lead other people to the killer. I mean,
absolutely. If I don't really believe in curses, so I would say it's just an attempt to have people believe a certain way.
For instance, here in Seattle, something I talked about a year and a half ago, I saw these drawings around town that looked like
Right. I
little
remember
ghosts.
seeing those with you.
And I speculated that the guy who was drawing these was tied into whatever the Mothman energy is, and that he was trying to send a message. And later I learned that this is a person whose friend had been here. He'd seen someone be murdered, and the police didn't want to investigate it, so he was going around drawing these things as if to do just that, to say, hey, there's a problem here.
Wow.
You haven't heard of that case? I mean, you didn't hear that?
No, I haven't heard of that. That's pretty amazing. That just reaffirms my belief that we're all tapped in if we want to be. I mean, it's available. We're just beginning to understand space, and if if you look at things like string theory and modern physics, and you begin to wonder about other dimensions and other possibilities of space and time and coexistence of those right now on this plane. Well, and it's not really a plane then, is it? So it's very possible that some of these things that have become our legends and our myths are species that exist on this planet, but within a different time, interdimensional.
I've heard strange rumors that the government studies window vortexes, like energy vortexes. Why would they want to do that? Do you have any idea?
Well, I think I would hope and I would expect our government to entertain every possibility. For them, it's probably, they have interests, profit, and military, and commerce, and mind control possibly even. But I would think that if there was a theory or a thought, that they would take some responsibility and investigate it. I would expect them to. If they can travel from here to Iraq through a portal in time, my God, I'm sure they would choose that over boats and planes. So I think they're probably interested in everything and anything. I'm searching for the evolution of this planet and this species, and I am one of a multitude that is doing that. And we're all part of that. And I believe the moment of creation hasn't even happened yet. We're just going toward it.
The moment of creation of when you sort of burst through into the ultraviolet realm where...
Yeah.
Because I've had this sense that there's like and I actually found a reference to this, 3 feet above the ground there's another dimension. I started thinking about it, and I started thinking about my dreams, and I often dream about this overlay landscape that is, sort of floating right there, and it has a different light quality to it.
Right.
And what are you referring to? I mean,
moment of creation?
Yeah. I mean, is that a place where you see the creation, where it's all timeless, or?
It's kind of like enlightenment in a way. I believe that there is a journey we're on. This whole planet is on, and everything within this ecosystem is on. But more specifically, because we are given the opportunity to reason and think and communicate, that we're on. And I think that collectively we're creating a moment of energetic change and shift within this universe that would therefore create a greater power. It's as though we are creating God. We are creating
physical space?
Physical space. Something we can't even imagine right now. I think that the evolution of this universe it's probably really old, but it's also really young. I mean, no matter what point in evolution or, whatever point you reach at, there's something before and there's something after. So we're going somewhere. And I think it's our responsibility as a community, as a species, as an occupant of this planet, to keep going forward.
Have you had some moments where you felt like you were in that place?
That moment of enlightenment? Yeah, often now. Often it comes where I realize how much of me is an identity that I'm walking around and being in order to exist socially. But more and more I'm getting the sense it's a very quiet feeling of energy and soul that's independent of name, independent of look, independent of being. It's just this incredible energy, and when I start to tune into it, I can see it in others too. And it gives me great value for life. I mean, it gives me great... I'm thankful to be able to express that energy source.
Does it help to think about it in terms of us coming to this calendar, 2012 Mayan calendar?
Right.
Does that do us any good to even think that way about time like that, or should we just?
I think the only thing with time is that there's always going to be before and there's always going to be after. So, how you measure time, I don't know how you measure time. How do you really truly measure time?
Well,
You can't.
that before and after is a concept That's the
Yeah.
difference, right? I mean, now is not a concept, but there's not as much of a concept perhaps, but before and after are, because they're not now. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know. This is something I haven't really thought.
So when you say there has to be before and after, I would interpret that as you're saying that in life, being alive and being in a physical body, you have to have before and after because you're locked in to the physicality of
Right.
it and the delusion that there is time.
Right. You got it. That's a good way of saying it, Andy.
I shouldn't say things for anyone like that. I'm
No,
sorry.
but that's perfect. That's good.
4 minutes left.
Do you? I'm done. I can stop now. Why don't you save it?
Everywhere it's there.
Okay, say that again
I
now.
want to know who it is. Because they have really, really artistic abilities, and he's doing graffiti all over town.
Well, say this again, real quick. It's bothering you?
Yes, it is.
What is it?
It's Combiaka. And it's everywhere, and I want to know who it is.
How do you say it?
Combiaka. Zombie, otherwise known as. And it's everywhere around town.
Zombie, AKA.
Yes. Yes.
And
And he sprays and he paints it, graffiti. And I want to know who he is because it's bothering me. Is that bizarre or what?
how's it bothering you?
I don't know. I'm asking him.
You think it's a code?
For me?
Yeah.
No, not for me.
A code for...
I think it might be a code that he needs to, channel his artistic abilities into something else, but I'll never find him. But it bothers me because I see it every day. It's everywhere.
Well, do you think he's a veteran?
Huh?
Is he somebody from the VA that's crazy?
No. It's probably somebody who goes to Marshall, and he just does graffiti, and he has good handwriting, and it just, he needs to channel it somewhere else. I don't know. I'll never find him. But it just bothers me. You think that's bizarre?
Well, what bothers you about it? I haven't heard a real reason. I've heard that he...
Well, there's no particular reason about it. In particular. I just think the person is artistic and needs to channel it somewhere, and I'll never find him, but he needs to do something else with it besides, but he is, it's the same thing over and over, zombie, AKA, and it's on and on and on, everywhere.
And the E is missing from the zombie?
Huh?
C-O-M-B-I?
Yep.
AKA.
Yeah.
Well, it might,
And this, it just bothers me, because I want to know who it is.
so that you can do what?
I don't know.